Hello, everybody. Welcome to Ya Bitch Radio podcast number 3. If you said it, we probably thought it already. Today, we're going to be talking about the topic of innocence of a child. We're going to be talking about cartoons and what is a good cartoon and what is a bad cartoon and why they are good or bad cartoons. We're going to be talking about, aspects of play, how to play, and where do you find necessary engagement in today's society to be able to fundamentally impact your child's life at a young age? Now, most people think that the age of toys are done with, and now it's all electronics and television. But I want to tell you how valuable it is for a kid to activate their mind, their eyes at night, especially newborns or 1-year-olds or 2-year-olds. They get lazy-eyed if they do not have pictures on their walls, if they do not have moving lights with sounds, lullabies, and stuff like that. You want to teach your child these type of things. This is why most toys had, flashing lights and sounds and like dun, 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 and all kinds of other stuff that went along with cartoons. It was a common scheme. A way to have people, the children, enjoy their childhood. And some schemes are common that are good, and some schemes are bad. But I want to tell you that most people do not realize the impact that a toy has on a child. They get really emotionally attached. And when you take away the toys and you put in television as a way to get emotionally attached, well, they're not getting a good childhood from it. Sometimes you need to take your child at 1 year old and do patty cake with them. You got to make sure that when you say, how big is this person? This big, they raise up their hands. You just got to do it through repetition. A child learns in the repetition of 3 times. And then you just do it, over and over again. You do the patty cake song 3 times. You say, how big are you? This big, 3 times. And eventually they will learn it, and that you'll be shocked at how much they know. Watching my nieces grow up, I realized that there was a special attribute to my niece that I gave a present to when she was a kid, a baby, a newborn. It was a moving lights that I bought from Toys R Us, and it had nice lullaby, everything. I said it was very important, and her mother took the time to do patty cake and to play with her and to talk to her and to communicate with her. Even though she couldn't communicate back, she took the time. And when I talked to her as an adult, she was able to recall every name of every person that her mother ever dated. She was able to recall instances so well and vividly. She was able to write and maintain her own journal, and she was able to do successful things. She valued her motor skills. She valued everything, and she's doing well today. Going to college and doing the right things in life. So you have to be fundamentally focused on how you teach a child to communicate. Some of the bad stuff that we will talk about is the gotcha moments. Here's another way to play: drawing. You can see fish on the wall. You can see octopuses. You can see lots of different things, and that is because the child loves color. They just do, and men and women love color too. You know, the the brighter the color, the more we get drawn to it. Um, part of what they know about us is that we are attracted to bright and shiny things. This is why in marketing, you can see that you're not buying the product as much as you're buying the brand itself, the marketing of the brand. The nicer the packaging looks, the better you assume it's going to taste. The name brand recognition. They used to, introduce packages with life lessons, um, life examples like rice or roni, the San Francisco treat, ding ding. And they used to have, different types of marketing to play on real life situations. I mean, if you think back now we're doing geographical locations. Avocado from Mexico, okay? And, you know, I'm trying to think of a specific brand that has to connect to life and has real world marketing. We live in a fantasy world for the most part. You know, uh, take take cereal. Most of it's based off of fantasy. You have one brand of cereal, Wheaties, that keep it true. Cheerios. Honey Nut Cheerios has a little cartoon bee. Everything about that aisle is basically based off of fantasy. Um, you know, fish had fishermen, and in America, we don't really do fishermen, as a job. Not for the most part. We outsource most of our fish and our fishing, but some do. Some do. Um, but I'm trying to think, where do we teach in the grocery store aisle life lessons like we used to? You know, um, Aunt Jemima, that was a brand uh, that got taken away from us because they said it was offensive, as they called her not a real character, not a real person. But I figure Aunt Jemima was more of like the Statue of Liberty. The Redskins, their name was under attack for a long time, trying to push the Washington Redskins, which is simply just saying George Washington and the Indians. They were not at end meet at that time. They were how you say you know not at war for the most part. We were focusing on the British and the colonies, the original colonies, before the expansion period of the United States of America. The expansion period was when all the tragedies started to happen, like the Trail of Tears and everything. Um, but we're not the only ones that handled their expansion period poorly. China, they had to get rid of their samurai, and they were so fascinated with the ammunition and the rate of speed of the bullets that they kind of made the samurai and their culture all go extinct. You know, uh, Even though that they were loyal to the emperor, but now look at it. Where's the emperor? You know, so we look for the emperor. We love the emperor. We don't necessarily love the uh, the People's Political Party of China. Um, for good reason. I mean, we won't get into all the reasons now because honestly, this is about trying to craft a story. When a kid colors, if he colors black, that means that he feels either a darkened emotion or that he has some type of uh, emotional connection to it. If he colors red, that's usually like a passionate color. If he colors blue, that's usually something of peace and tranquility. If they color you know outside the lines, it usually means like a creativity. If they draw the sun differently than on the right hand corner, that means that they're thinking about things a little bit differently. There's so many expectations that you can have when you actually sit down and take the time and get to know your child. I met a man. He had a conversation with me. He said that his son and him had an argument. He rough handled the cat, and then the little boy, his little boy, said to him, he said, "Dad," he said, "don't do that." And then the dad said, "Well, you hit the dog with a stick." And the kid cried, and he felt really bad. But he asked him, "Why did you say that to me?" And then the dad said, "Well, you taught me something. You taught me to repent in the way, and that I am sorry to you for saying it and bringing up the past, and let's agree not to talk about it ever again." And I thought to myself, I said, "Is that really the moral of the story?" You need to admire a child for their handiwork. You really do. And this child, you know, repented so much of hitting that dog with that stick that when his dad brought it back up, he used it to say that you didn't change. Now, if you turn that moment into saying that you have your own weakness that you cannot change, but he is not his father's son. He can change. But as long as you're teaching him not to talk about it again and agreeing with the child and making a bargain that you're sorry and we just won't talk about it again, well, that's going to continue something called the ABC method, and the cycle of abuse. The honeymoon stage starts again. As soon as you find that you're sorry, the honeymoon starts. And then the honeymoon, everything's fine, you act like everything's good, and then there's a triggering event, or something goes wrong. And then you're angry about something else. And, it's a well-known fact in relationships that abusers tend to go through a honeymoon stage after a blow-up. And the same can be said of any type of relationship, a doctor-patient relationship, any type of relationship. If you push somebody long enough, they're going to blow up. They are. They're going to blow up, and it's going to be in the most professional way with a doctor-patient relationship. They're going to suggest some type of medical treatment for mental illness. It's going to be through a boyfriend and girlfriend experience where he will cheat on her or he will do something, some type of triggering event. It all boils down to like a volcano. That's where the volcano starts to stumble, and when it erupts, everything turns black and red. Everything turns black and red. Now, in these pictures, you do not see black and red. You really don't. Nowhere in this place do you see black and red. Like the drawer is angry. You can see cheerful, healthy, developmental skills. Now, I mentioned the ABC method. ABC is the action or the action, the belief, and with an action you have something that triggers you. That's your action. Your belief is what you thought before, during the incident that you're going through, and the emotional consequence or the consequence is basically saying this is what you did, and then you evaluate that through DNA. But we um, basically determine the consequence or decipher the consequence, and we reevaluate everything, and then we express it again. Now, there's probably other technical terms for it, but what we do with D&E is that we learn from our experiences. And then there's F, tell a friend. Tell a friend what you have learned. Tell a friend where you learned it and how it done it. And that's why I recommended to the guy that with the child that brought it up. I said, you just did D&E. Tell your kid and tell him that you admire him for having that type of fortitude. That type of fortitude will get you far in life. And say that I wish I could be like you, in a way or not, but just say that you admire him and that you look up to him because he remembers something that he changed upon and I didn't. And it's a hard way to have a conversation, but when you listen, you can do many things. But the conversation itself can be very challenging. There's a cartoon that I'm going to mention later on that through repetition teaches you not to listen. I never had that as a problem growing up. Actually, I had quite the opposite effect. I had what was programmed in 1996, and 1997, and 1998. I had the Space Jam. Everybody come up, it's time to jam now. We got a real thing going on. Welcome to the Space Jam. Space Jam, it's your chance. Get your dance on the Space Jam. All right, all right, all right. We had Michael Jordan and all the people respecting his story. I remember in school they taught us Michael Jordan's story. We read Michael Jordan's story. We knew that before he became a basketball player that he had to practice every day. We knew this type of thing. It was and we learned about how to popcorn a situation. Popcorn is basically saying that you read and then you pick a reader. You should try that with your family. Read a book together. It will build family cohesiveness. I believe in you. I believe that through the power of one person can change the entire world. Through the power of two people, well, they can, pick each other up, as the Bible says. Two people can, if one falls down, the other one can pick them up, and that's very important. Um, Yeah, so this is a lot of words, but you have to engage the experience. You really do. When you engage the experience, you can have yourself a very positive reaction. Um, you know, um, you can treat your child. You can treat your child as your teacher, and learn what he is sad about. All right. I'm not going to get into really engaging in the experience. That's a personal experience with you. I wrote down what I wrote down. Obviously, um, one of the key factors is about stress, and I do believe that you should stress your child out. You really should. Stress can be a very healthy thing. People load their child up with going to going to committing committing to something like sports. That could be a big stressor in a child's life. You know, and sometimes they don't even give them a ride to the sports. They have to carry all their gear on their back and ride on the bike. You know, that's a military way of training a child. Is that they have responsibilities like sports, and sports is something that you commit to. And yes, I have seen the one that rode on the bike and carried his backpack with him with all his gear and everything with him to practice. I saw him commit himself to stay in the final game, where he came in second place. But the pitcher got emotional, and he kind of teared up because he didn't think we were going to win. He knew the game was almost over, and it's very difficult when you're a coach and you look at that type of thing to react at the time. Um, but the after party, the second place party that we came into, because second place in the whole island of Okinawa was a big deal. Nobody was able to on all the bases that we played beat us until our first string all went to football. And then we played with our second string, and our second string did a fantastic job. And I was proud of each one of them because I knew that each one of them was unique. And that is what I just did there was engaging the experiences. It's basically recalling it and sharing it with a friend, sharing it with the audience, and basically encouraging people to reach out. That's engaging the experience. What I just did there. And a lot of times, we don't have time to reflect on our life because we're so busy. I believe that reflection is very good, but who do you reflect to? Honestly, you could just talk. You don't need to know God by name. Um, you know, a lot of people will say that they have a lot of faith and a friend in Jesus. And I say to you, yeah. And a lot of people say they have a friend and faith in Muhammad. And so, if you have to use Muhammad, if you have to use Jesus, if you have to use either name to get your point across, or if you have to use some other sect, if you're a religion, even if you have to use, dare I say, even Satan, if you're a Satanist. Uh, I believe that some people just need to talk. And the more that you're open and honest, the more you will realize where you fault in your way. You know, to say that that you enjoy seeing the suffering of others, I don't believe that. I don't believe that of any of you. I don't believe that of any of the Satanists. Honestly, I believe that they just want to find love in life. I do. I believe that they want to help people deep down inside. Um, but they're under a policy, and it's a weird policy. A policy that says that you do not help, uh, or you just don't believe. Well, yeah. Those are the two policies. You don't help, or you just you live for the world, and that you are your own ruler. But I say, when I heard somebody say they wanted their own kingdom, and I was like, or in their house, like their own house to be their castle, and I was like, dude, you do realize that you have an internet kingdom, right? I mean, think about it. You have the whole kingdom that you want right there on the internet, and you have your personal castle right there, right there on the internet. And honestly, it's the most funniest thing. When I look back and I remember the people that were talking to me about that, they tried to convince me. It was like, hey, yeah, go watch, go watch, Hi Jesus in his movie or something like that. Watch like Rock and Roll Jesus. Look at them, I'm like, wow, guys, you're very loose, right? I prefer not to. Don't you want to watch a stoner movie? They said. I'm like, no, not really. I rather do something positive, like give you guys a gift. Have you ever given a gift to a store, brought in tea or brought in something just because you were going there and you knew to go there, or left a gift on the sidewalk, or at a recovery center, or at a prison, or at just anywhere. Like you just left money and some tea somewhere, and you just knew that it was at a halfway house, and people were going to open it. You just knew that, and that you didn't need to see their faces because you knew that whoever got that tea or that gift or of money or whatever, you know, they're going to need it. You're just doing it blindly. You're just doing good acts of work blindly. You're not letting your right hand know what your left hand is doing, basically. And it doesn't mean don't tell people because, honestly, that's the most craziest interpretation I've ever heard. Don't tell people what your right hand or your left hand and right hand are doing. I'm like, why wouldn't you tell people? You know, Jesus said, and as I told you in podcast too, he says, it's not what goes into a man, but what comes out of his mouth that defiles him. Telling people to do good works and the works that you would do, uh, in the name of God or in the name of charity or in the name of positivity, that is not that is not defiling you. There's no way that it would defile you. It would only serve you to encourage each other in this time that others' words defiled the hearts. And so that's the second example of engaging the experience. Uh, and yes, I give you a little hint on how to do it because it's a communication style. Honestly, when I was a young man, I used to say to myself, I said, I wish I can tell a story. God, I wish. Man, I wish. Everything about me, I wish I could tell a story that was lasting long. I couldn't do it. And you know why I couldn't do it? It was probably because as a child, I grew up watching cartoons. I couldn't express to them. Nobody related to me. Nobody was going to sit there and say, Tom and Jerry, Jerry kids, do do do. No one was going to sing with me. And so when I do enter a prison, sometimes they say, don't play with me. And I'm like, what do you mean? That's all I know. Why do you reject me for playing? Sometimes I want to play a game with people. I want them to use their imagination. I know you have one. Deep down inside, I know that your imagination is still there. You know, can't you imagine just, whipping away, playing imaginary cards? There's a movie that had the mental patients in the hospital playing imaginary cards. And you know what? They challenged themselves. And then you have this one guy just coming up and says, "Oh, I got a full house." And he's like, "Oh!" They're like 10,000 big ones to buy in. And he's like, "Okay." And it's all invisible money, it's invisible cards. It's basically an act of charades. And those are the experiences that a child can do. You see them playing by themselves, talking, entertaining themselves, cleaning and using their mind. That is the stuff that the computer takes from you, or the electronics takes from you, from being able to do, because you get dependent on a crutch. You know, some of these days, you have to really look. How is it if the whole world is trying to brainwash you or subliminally message you, right? And the whole world is doing it through advertisement, through the power of suggestion, through stuff like this. Pringles, 45% less fat and filling. Very good and tasty brand. Try Pringles, for this is a delicious snack. It's going to make you maybe want Pringles. So if the whole world is trying to use the power of suggestion on you, how do you combat that? Well, I suggest selecting visual aids. You know, um, Sort of like saying to yourself, I am going to decorate my house with family pictures of my grandfather and all the pictures that I could possibly have. You know, I'm gonna have less pictures of me and more of my friends that I've met, the homeless people if I have them. Brother, sister, something that I have a little family wall for. Because that's gonna bring connection to the child. That's gonna bring intimacy. And I'm gonna tell you the reason why marriages do not work in this world in America is because there's a disconnection. There's a huge disconnection. They used to say that a girl dates a guy because she's angry at her father. Well, now a girl just dates because she's angry at her situation, I guess. Yeah, I mean, money is definitely a big dating tool. If a man has a lot of money, he is likely to get a very hot woman. You know, um, look at Trump. Not much in the act of looks, But his wives, beautiful, man. Whew. You know, all three of them. I mean, I just honestly, I understand a woman rejecting him. Honestly, I get the Eugene Carroll. I get that the sex offender quotations that he is under, because honestly, if you look at the law says if you're convicted of a sex offense, and basically, he got away with a civil law conviction of a sex offense, and therefore doesn't have to register as a sex offender, which to me is a very, very, very interesting topic. It's a topic all by itself. Maybe we'll get into it, maybe we won't. But it is very important to try to maintain what visual aids there are for being pure. It really is. You know, um, Sometimes you just need something to tell you visually, that this is not what you need to see. This is not what you need to see. This is not what you need to do. You know, Sometimes like a little test. You can print out. I got this from Pexels.com, Pexels.com, and it was like cartoon stop or cartoon no was the search, and basically, you can put some words down and have them put on top of it the picture, and say this is a no, this is a no, this is a no, and then you know for sure that they know the difference between what is right and what is wrong, and you're the parent. You're able to really, really direct your child in the most positive way. You know, you're able to learn your child in a very positive way. And so, you know, I want to talk to you about what kind of videos are on YouTube. All right. Specifically, we're gonna talk about this cocoa melon, um, and I am gonna branch off real fast while you look at the screen. I'm gonna branch off. I'm gonna start saying about the commercials that they put on YouTube Kids. You know, they are commercials about erectile dysfunction or cheating wives or something along those lines. Like honestly, like when I look at commercials that my brother caught my youngest niece watching because she was watching YouTube Kids, and he was like, I don't know why they put this stuff up there. And I'm like, yeah, I know why, because they're suggesting cheating. They're suggesting it to the youth. It's a common scheme or plan. It's not about the money. So, though the people at Cocomelon, they are absolutely a business in it for the money. So today I'm going to talk to you about exactly what type of technique that they use um, to actually manifest, a cartoon that grabs your attention. And I wouldn't even call it a cartoon. I would call it an animation-tron. But it grabs your attention. You can't look away from it, and it's specifically designed for what they wear, the color of the bus. Every single aspect of it is specifically designed to conform to your style. The repeating, the disobedience in the child. You know why they want a child to be disobedient? Because they want you to be frustrated. If you are a frustrated population at your children or whatever, or you're distracted from this world, you're going to tune into the news and you're going to believe everything that they say, because that's your only avenue of escape, because you're not using your imagination. Now, on one television, you have Cocomelon. On the other side, you have life scenes. When they're looking at Cocomelon, they're marked yes. When they look away at the life scenes, they are marked no. When they are watching Cocomelon, they repeat things 3 times. And when they say no, 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 I'm not going to brush my teeth. No, 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 I'm not going to go to bed. Stuff like that. that extent, I should say. It is that when they're looking at life scenes, they are active listening, and they are marked no. They don't want active listening. When they look back at Cocomelon, that saturation is turned up to 100%, the same as a Vegas slot machine. When they look right, they pause, they reflect. A guy pouring a cup of coffee, someone getting a haircut, and it changes. Even every 20 seconds. When they look left, they learn to mimic, not brushing their teeth, not going to bed. All right? So that is called the distraction room. And it's a very interesting technique. You can actually do it yourself. If you're trying to train a child to multitask. In fact, Sherlock Holmes did it in the show Elementary. He was watching, 7 TVs and knowing what was on each one of them? That was pretty brilliant. Now, I'm telling you, to be able to know what's on 7 televisions, that is what makes Sherlock Holmes the greatest detective. Food for thought. And by the way, Elementary is a wonderful show. It's about it's about Sherlock Holmes being in New York, and he has his sidekick Julie, I think it is. I forget the name, but he has his sidekick. She is the most amazing person, and her name is Watson. So it is a woman playing Watson, and she does a fantastic job. Elementary is a great show. So is Monk. Monk is a great show too. A very funny show. It really grabs you in, and also keeps your hands clean because honestly, these are the positive shows that you want to show. And so if you would put on your television one show Sherlock Holmes, the other show Cocomelon, I'm going to tell you that might actually break the distraction room's spell. But not on young kids because they bring them in at the age of 2 years old to do this distraction room. They're actually, they may look at Sherlock Holmes, they do, but they don't want to challenge Sherlock Holmes the cartoon. Sherlock Holmes the cartoon would definitely grab the attention. But most cartoons that they show on television right now on YouTube, they had no words. They had no words. It's just and it makes raising kids very rough. Actually, my niece, she's at the age of almost at the age of 5, and she's still not potty trained. Because honestly, it is too much for my brother to be able to really do it alone, and I don't have the technique to be able to go in there and help them because it's just a long story. But it's just when I go there, I mean, it's usually just a pop in, do what I can, give what I can, and go. Honestly, that's something that really, really, I hope that the small gestures in life is a lasting impact. Ever since Toys R Us went away, I wasn't able to buy the toys that I would like to buy for them. They prefer Hatchables and stuff like that nowadays. But Hatchables are nice. They're a good toy. That's a nice thing to like. But for some reason, it is another thing that is like a risk. You don't know which Hatchable you're gonna get. Honestly, it's a really hard world to navigate through marketing. But whosoever shall offend one of these little ones, which believe in me, it is better for him to have a millstone were hang around his neck, and that he will be drowned in the depths of the sea. I mean, is there anything else that we need to take from that? Yes. Yes, yes, yes. Now, I'm telling you, you can offend a little one if they look back and they say that my childhood was messed up because I watched too much television, or I'm not developing correctly, or that my schoolwork is suffering because I did not get raised through my motor skills, my communication. I'm not able to present myself because I entered college recently. I really did, and I noticed a direct difference between me and my peers. Some of my peers, they're a little bit um, a little bit strung out, I would say. Their communications patterns are a little bit sporadic. Uh, you know, Everyone seems to have, everyone that has a mental illness seems to say that they have a mental illness. Um, it's just one of those things that I just don't understand what the communication is about. But we like being having a teacher. We really do. All of us do. As one unit, we love having a teacher because we don't feel like we get to express ourselves enough in this world. We really don't. Um, the only drawback is that the teacher, he does not answer the questions like I would want. He doesn't put himself on the spot. He maintains that he's searching for only the criteria of a pass or fail. He doesn't become personal. He doesn't open up. I like the story of Boy Meets World. Corey Topanga and his neighbor, the principal or the teacher of his class. I forget his name, honestly. But I remember that whenever Corey had a problem, he could come to him. Whenever Corey had a problem in anything, his relationship or college or anything, he could come to him. And that's what I was hoping for with all teachers, that they would learn from that. But honestly, Boy Meets World is a show that they don't spin anymore on the radio or on the air. Um, they might have new episodes of Boy Meets Girl. I think they do, but the classic Boy Meets World, you know, it's literally probably uh, 2 days long if you stretch it out. It is important to teach your child television history. It really is. It makes them be able to understand what it is like to go back to back, take 10 paces, and fire. Now, I thought about that. I said that was the most brilliant thing ever for a relationship. If you go back to back with your wife, right, in your argument, and you guys aren't looking at each other's faces, you guys go back to back, I guarantee you your problem will be solved very quickly. And for every complaint you have, you take one step. By the time you get to 10, you guys are going to want to hug. That's going to be your fire. I guarantee you that this will work for you. If you're having any type of conflicts in your house, you go back to back with them, take 10 paces before you fire. Yeah, just don't use what they dramatize in television. The media was liars now, the media was liars then. The media has always been a liar. They may report the news to you, but that's because the news affects them. If it didn't affect them, they wouldn't care. I just want to give a shout out to oh, I forget his name, honestly. Yeah, I do. I really like the fact that people were emailing about Trump. All the people that emailed about Trump, what they really thought versus what they said on the air. I really want to give a shout out to them because it shows to you the double-sidedness of the media, and it's always been double-sidedness of the media. You know, the only person that I really think deserves a little extra credit in this world is Pope Francis. You know, he was an excellent pope. You know, I really think that on April 21st, that is the day of friendship. You know, that is the day of friendship, April 21st. That's the national, for me, it's the National Day of Friendship. So, yeah. Love thy neighbor as thyself. When you take away your family, who is your neighbor? I just want to give everyone a special thanks for paying attention and following through. It's always been a pleasure to talk to you. And this was Ya Bitch Radio. If you said it, we probably thought it already. Have a good night.